One of the most popular takes from the anti-AEW crowd when bashing the AEW product is to throw out the brain-dead comments and claim that AEW does not know how to create homegrown talent and that they 100% purely rely on ex-WWE talent, ignoring the fact that most WWE talents themselves are actually ex-indie stars and that WWE's philosophy for years was to scoop up the best independent talents in the world to keep the independent scene weak. These comments are completely untrue when you look at AEW in a wider sense. It is undeniable that AEW has slowly gathered a core of talent that used to work in WWE in limited or underused roles. And the name value those wrestlers built up in WWE is clearly a benefit to AEW and its roster. No level-headed fan will sit here and claim that AEW has not benefited from WWE, but to claim that the entire identity of the company and its ever-growing success is purely due to ex-WWE wrestlers is a false narrative that only fools or trolls could possibly buy into. Right now, is the show dominated by guys that used to work in WWE? Sure. Is that a problem? Absolutely not. These are wrestlers that WWE chose to let walk out of their doors and into free agency. Top level talent that they could not find a spot for in their shows, and talent that they did not value as being worth keeping. If AEW didn't sign them and had a strict no ex-WWE talent policy, people would be claiming that Tony Khan is too egotistical and proud for his own good, and the company's mediocre growth and in-ring wrestling product would prove he should be signing the aforementioned wrestlers. The right business decision, similar to what WWE did with the independent scene, was to rope in the cream of the crop that was let go or walked. Guys like Andrade, Malachi, Keith Lee, and Miro. Guys that solidify the roster. And of course, genuine difference makers and needle movers like Bryan Danielson and, more importantly, CM Punk. These were no-brainer decisions. The fact that people treat these moves with contempt shows, to me at least, that there's a group of people actively wishing for the failure of AEW. Anyone who wants the company to succeed should discuss these moves with nothing but adulation. These moves will be looked back on in 5 to 10 years as some of AEW's more shrewd and tactical long-term moves, because at the end of the day, what the detractors and ex-WWE talent haters don't realize is that most of the homegrown AEW guys aren't ready, nor should they be. Fans act as if a company in its first 5 years, like AEW, should have a roster of completely homegrown talents across a show that has grown to 1 million weekly viewers. That's absolutely insane. AEW in its first year or two needed to push more of its homegrown talent because they didn't have a choice. That's all they had. But the genuine truth about most of those wrestlers from year 1 and 2 is that they just don't make the cut anymore, not at the absolute top level. It's not that Tony Khan is choosing ex-WWE guys over his own because he has a fetish for them. It's because those talents have come in and shown that at this stage in their careers, they are supreme. Keywords, at this stage. There is only one match where an ex-WWE win over an AEW original made me question that notion, and that was Darby Allin's recent loss to Kyle O'Reilly. I don't really get the Kyle O'Reilly hype as a singles wrestler, and for him to defeat Darby in a last-minute match thrown together on a pay-per-view was very weird, considering Darby has low-key disappeared from anything relevant recently, and Kyle has disappeared altogether. And at the end of the day, it was a completely forgetful match, which speaks further to the point of AEW booking last-minute matches to stack pay-per-view cards with no real reason or meaning, leading to forgetful matches, a genuine issue and criticism of AEW I can actually get on board with and agree with in a constructive way. I feel like what most people forget to do with AEW is take a step back and recognize that this is not a 50-year dynasty and juggernaut like WWE or even New Japan Pro Wrestling. AEW has not had the luxury of establishing itself and its developmental scene for a solid decade. I watch a lot of sports, and what AEW is attempting to do is reminiscent of a new team joining an existing league. The first tactics implemented by a new team are usually to get out of contract veterans, underperforming talent on the cheap, or young prospects who would jump at the opportunity of being featured in a bigger role. That sets up the short-term foundations for the club, while the second tactic is implemented. Establish an identity and find the talent that fits that identity. Usually, a big-name player or two are found who are willing to take the bet on the project, and the team and its attractiveness to other players is built around them. Players from Tactic 1 are let go at this stage, replaced with improved and refreshing talents as the team improves and the benchmark is increased. The improved team makes players want to join the team, rather than the team having to chase the players. The last tactic to set the team up long term is to create a self-sustaining youth development project. Less reliance on external markets and more reliance on building your own future stars internally. You don't start with tactic 3. Right now, AEW is finding itself in the second stage of development, and in the next couple of years, they should definitely look at how to better improve their development system and promotion of internal AEW guys. But the bigger picture right now is to make AEW as attractive as possible for professional wrestlers around the world, and it would be delusional to say that right now they aren't succeeding in that department. But the best part about it is that the young guys that were thrusted into prominent positions too early can actually have some time to breathe now. The 4 pillars of AEW was my very first video on this channel, and it got the ball rolling. But as mentioned in a recent video about Jungle Boy, realistically speaking, 3 out of the 4 are not ready to be the face of the company. And thanks to all the ex-WWE signings, they've all been afforded the time to sit on the back burner to develop and refine themselves as professional wrestlers a little more. And perhaps for the 4 pillars, this is a little more jarring because we've seen them in main event spots and seen them as champions in the company. I think that's why seeing Darby specifically lose to Kyle O'Reilly of all people was so perplexing to me. Other than it just being an unnecessary decision in an unnecessary match, it felt like Darby was taking a step back. It feels like Sammy Guevara has taken a step back. MJF is not on television right now, leaving Jungle Boy as the only one of the 4 pillars who seems to be moving forward in his career at the moment. And yes, right now, in the short term with a narrow viewpoint, it worries me a little. But long term, I feel these moves and shifts in booking will be a case of short-term pain for long-term gain. Where it is less jarring is for the guys coming up after the 4 pillars. The second wave, you could call them. Guys like Wheeler Yuta, Daniel Garcia, Dante Martin, Lee Moriarty, Hook, Hobbs, and Starks, and of course, Wardlow. Unlike the 4 pillars, this group has no pressure on their young shoulders to carry the company. Many hands make light work, and the many hands of ex-WWE guys is a benefit to the AEW homegrowns in the long term. And not to mention how much these younger guys can learn from more experienced competitors directly in the ring. Whether it be Lee Moriarty being able to learn and perform on screen with a Matt Sydal or Jon Moxley, whether it's Daniel Garcia with Chris Jericho and Bryan Danielson, whether it's Dante Martin from Kenny Omega or Wheeler Yuta from the Blackpool Combat Club's all ex-WWE lineup apart from himself, that on-screen, in-ring kayfabe performance, plus the wealth of knowledge in the entire locker room at their disposal and fingertips. There's no rush on any of these guys being world champion, the 4 pillars included. When AEW first started, I was convinced the lineage of the world title would have at least 3 of the 4 pillars within the first 10 champions, but now, 5 different champions in, I believe it should probably only be one of those 4 pillars, and I think we know who I'm talking about. Don't get me wrong, not every single AEW guy is a youngster, so at the end of the day, that viewpoint can't be taken with everybody. In the singles division, at varying levels, you have Hangman Adam Page, Kenny Omega, Lance Archer, Orange Cassidy, Scorpio Sky, and Ethan Page, who all come to mind as more experienced wrestlers who never represented WWE. And I think, if I'm not wrong, 5 of those 6 aforementioned names have been in AEW world title matches, and 3 have been singles champions in AEW. Not a terrible ratio. This idea that AEW guys are getting buried, I just don't see it. And the longer time goes, the more ex-WWE will be fading from a lot of these wrestlers' profile. Jon Moxley is not really regarded as an ex-WWE guy anymore. Miro is slowly shedding the ex-WWE guy label off of him. The same way most of these independent talents became WWE guys, they will also become AEW guys. And I actually feel like that argument has been ramped up a little bit more due to ROH as well. That Tony Khan now picks ex-WWE guys or AEW guys over ROH guys. And that's like, come on, I mean, no disrespect to ROH and the wrestlers they had there, but there's levels to this game. There's a reason a lot of these guys were still in ROH. Do I think Tony Khan has too much on his plate? Absolutely. Should he be booking ROH? Probably not. Do I really care how ROH gets booked? Not really. So maybe my opinion on ROH specifically shouldn't be taken too seriously. My concern is AEW and its growth and success. And going back to the main reason for this video, I don't see the problem in bringing in ex-WWE guys if they're used in the right way and overall elevate the entire roster. I think AEW has bigger problems than having a roster that's too talented. That will naturally work itself out. For me, there are bigger issues. How are we still watching Jericho versus Kingston? Why do pay-per-views go for 6 hours with matches thrown together the week before the show? And more importantly, for me, on a personal enjoyment and viewing experience level, why are we allowing such dangerous spots on a week-to-week basis? The injury rate at AEW is way too high, and the apparent focus on spot fests and high flying lately is honestly getting a little stale. I feel like AEW right now is in a rinse and repeat cycle. We're spinning our wheels in the mud, churning out the same matches with different participants. I won't go on too long about it because I still enjoy Dynamite, but considering I'm talking about criticisms thrown in AEW's direction, the wrestling sometimes leaves a bit to be desired in the ring psychology department, which I find to be incredibly important. I don't even know what this video was, truthfully. I started talking about ex-WWE guys, then a long-term plan, a structure of AEW, then ROH. Then I started dissing AEW. I don't even know. I just had some thoughts that I had to get out. I guess the main point among the word vomit is that ex-WWE guys are a good thing for AEW, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with identifying misused talent and using them in your own company in a better role. That's another thing that people don't really grasp about this. A lot of these ex-WWE guys were not world champions. They weren't even champions, full stop. A lot of them were extremely misused, and thanks to AEW, they actually had a second chance to save their careers, and a lot of them are doing a fantastic job at that. So why we see an issue with it, I have no idea. What are your guys' thoughts on ex-WWE guys? At this stage, the AEW roster is probably a majority ex-WWE guys. I think that the roster is better for it. Would you rather take this roster or year one AEW roster? The answer is very obvious. If you did enjoy today's video, do leave a like on it. It helps out in the algorithm, so you'll be helping the channel out. You guys have been killing it with the support lately, actually, so thank you very, very much. And I'm trying to keep these weekly videos going, and I think I'm doing all right at it as well. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. I'm sure there'll be some interesting discussions down there, and of course, I will be down there as I always am. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope you're happy and healthy. Stay stunning.